Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very powerful show coming right up with special guest Kevin Lawrence, and he's here today to share with us his new book, Your Oxygen Mask First: 17 Habits to Help High Achievers Survive and Thrive in Leadership and Life. Now, Kevin is known for combining business with a no-holds-barred, tell-it-like-it-is style. With a career spanning 20 years and 4 continents, he's helped hundreds of CEOs and executives break through challenges, grow their companies, and find personal success along the way. So let's welcome to the show, Kevin Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this discussion for a long time. I mean, once I got my hands on your book, I could not put it down. It's got so much useful information.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate to learn a lot from all the leaders and CEOs that I work with, that there's so much I want to share, and actually I had to keep a lot of it out because, there's so many tools and techniques and learnings, but there's lots in there, but there's more too.
Well, and that's probably why people have you come out and work with their companies and organizations and do speaking and stuff like that, so they can kind of dive into each of these parts maybe a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, you could spend a day on each of these principles if you really wanted to dig in deep. But most of us don't have that much time, and that's why in the book it covers off the 17 habits, so you can get a preview of them and understand some tools you can use to get into them. But yeah, you can spend a lifetime on a lot of this stuff.
Oh, my goodness. Well, and why don't we start, I guess, at the beginning for you. You said you've been working on this for some time. What was the inspiration behind writing this book?
Interestingly, it actually started with Elvis Presley, believe it or not. And I was really young back in 1977 when Elvis died, and it was a pretty traumatic event in my family, and although I didn't realize it in the moment. But we worshipped Elvis in our house. He was a legend, and to the point of in our dining room we had one piece of art, and aside from the velour wallpaper that you would have seen in the 60s and 70s, we had a picture of Elvis framed in our dining room because he was such a big figure in our world, literally, no exaggeration. And when he died, I was a young kid, and it shocked me because I'm like, hey, he's famous, he's rich. He has a mansion. He has an airplane, and he's a rock star. He's got it all. But how come he basically, destroyed his life and destroyed himself? And it perplexed me. And as I went on throughout my life, I was always fascinated, probably because of that initial shock, fascinated why really successful people who had it all, because, our family didn't have it all. We kind of scraped by. And when I see these people who had it all and lived what we would call the American dream, but then they ended up destroying their life or ending their life early, I didn't get it. And as I got into the world of business, I started to see similar things, but nobody was talking about it. So after 20-something years of being in boardrooms most days of every week, working with leaders and CEOs to work out their problems of the company, I just started to see continually that people were destroying themselves in the process, and many people were paying way too big a price, way too big a price for it with their own personal pain. And it's made me very curious about it, and that's why I've been studying it intently. Probably since, really intently since I was 24, because that was the first time I completely destroyed myself. And ever since, learning about it, for my own recovery, and what I can do to help other people who seem to struggle with these same things.
It's interesting because, I've been in sales. I was a VP of sales and had 100 people reporting to me all across the U.S., and it's high demand.
Oh, yeah.
So you're available 24/7, and the burnout after a few years, is pretty high.
It's predictable and high.
Mm-hmm.
There's a study, I don't have the exact stats top of mind, but it's a majority of executives have some form of burnout at any given time. And burnout there's a spectrum of it, right? From just fatigue through to serious, mental breakdown. But there's a lot of wear and tear on people, and it's not just executives, although that's what I focus on most in my world. It's lots of people. But it's serious. And when you get people to open up and talk about it, it's like you've just sort of shared, it's common. And my belief is it's the norm. Everyone is going to get burnt out, cooked, worn out, whatever you want to call it, every 3 to 5 years for most people. For some really driven executives, it's more frequent. And unfortunately, the part that really makes me passionate about this is really good people who are incredibly dedicated to their work end up losing their careers and sometimes losing their lives or their businesses because they push themselves so hard without the right tool set to support it, and that's what causes them to implode.
Oh, I would agree. I can remember one year just working insane hours. It's probably working 14, 16 hours a day. And, of course, you hit those top tiers as a producer. And it's interesting. And then, the corporate office would come back and say, oh, you guys did so great. Now we're going to add an increase to what you did last year by 10%. And I'm like, I'm done. I just about killed myself doing this.
Exactly. And the truth is, and one of the things I share in the book is that basically what we do is we succumb to our own success. And that's the root of the problem. These are highly committed, high-performing people. And it's no different than, we're really passionate about hiking. And we master the local hills and mountains in our areas, and we know the trails, and our endurance is good and everything. And then all of a sudden tomorrow, hey, let's climb Everest on Saturday. And it's like we're really good hikers, but we're just not prepared, both physically, mentally, or equipment-wise, or experience-wise, to summit Everest. But then we just go and start doing it anyways. Because, hey, we did the hills in our backyard, we should be able to do Everest. And it's not like that we couldn't summit Everest. It's just that with the tools and the approaches we have, we're not ready or capable yet. So for a lot of people, and if you take your example, of course you can produce 10 times as much as you did, but you need different tools and structures and insights to be able to do that. And unfortunately, we end up trying to summit Everest with our backyard hiking skills, and that's where the trouble starts. And when it gets weird, and this is the key, we go talk to our friends and family about it, and then they throw a whole bunch of conventional wisdom at us and make it worse. Because a high-performing, high-strung, highly committed executive has a very different operating system, a very different operating system than would what we'll call a normal person. And when you give normal advice to a high-strung executive, that's where we get in serious trouble.
Well, and I guess, this is actually perfect because your book, Your Oxygen Mask First, is perfect for what we're talking about. Because for those that are looking to climb Everest, there's not a whole lot of oxygen when you get to the top. It's a different atmosphere. Things are different. You need to be prepared. And that's why your book is such a great resource, because for people that are looking to do that, make that commitment, they can actually put their oxygen mask on first and keep going.
Yeah, and remember that it's important because for a lot of people, and I'll explain kind of the concept of the book and where that came from, but for a lot of people, they have been wildly successful in their world, and they have self-sacrificed to get there, meaning they don't put their oxygen mask on first. They compromise their sleep and their exercise and their personal pastimes and their family time to succeed. And unfortunately, that does work. There's no two ways about it. That is a winning strategy until, boom, you hit the wall and fall on your face. Mm-hmm. It works until you wear yourself down so much that you have some sort of wake-up or epiphany. And whether it's a spouse, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, a spiritual guide, whoever it happens to be, sooner or later it gets us. And I had an amazing teacher. His name is Thomas Leonard. He was father of the modern coaching movement that started about 25 years ago. And he always taught us in his teachings that if you wanted to be wildly successful, you needed to be incredibly selfish incredibly selfish. And we're like, whoa, what do you mean? We don't want to be bad, evil people. Selfish is not good. And he's like, well, that's because you misunderstand the language. He goes, there's this thing called self-centered, where you basically suck all the oxygen out of the room, and there's almost a greed and a take, and it's, you gain and others are depleted. And he goes, none of us want to be that. Those are people that we don't like and don't want to be around. But he goes, and there's this other thing called selfless. This is the person that will metaphorically give you the shirt off their back, and they will do anything for anyone at any time. He goes, those people don't do anything in this world. They fall because they deplete themselves and they have no energy left, so there's actually nothing inside them to give. They have a beautiful spirit, but they don't have anything left in them to give, so they lose their impact in the world and fall by the wayside. And he goes, there's this beautiful place in the middle called selfish, where selfish, the intent is you take phenomenal care of yourself, so you have much, much more to give others. So it looks a little bit self-centered, but the spirit is to give more, not just to take for yourself. And he goes, but that's a hard thing for people to do. When you have, work commitments and family commitments and other people's expectations, learning to master taking care of yourself is an art and a commitment. And that's where this oxygen mask first came from, is that teaching people that you need to take phenomenal care of yourself if you want to continue to give your best to your work and your family and your friends and your community. But unfortunately, a lot of people have been programmed with, quote, conventional wisdom to do otherwise. And, people are trying to be, a servant leader, which I love the concept of, but it's conditioning people with some very dangerous belief systems.
Well, it's really interesting because you do hear that thrown around quite a bit. And I know in your book you talk about, and you've kind of touched on this already, that most advice is nonsense. And so where do you come up with it? It's nonsense. Is it just because it's a lot of stuff that maybe makes us feel good, that's not really, appropriate for a work situation? What are your thoughts about that?
So I look at it from the context of super high committed, what we would call A-player, high-performing leaders. That's the world I work in. So I go back for normal people. Normal people would not be working 14 hours a day for a year, right? Normal people would not miss their kids' birthdays or special family celebrations for work. Normal people would not go on an airplane almost every week to do their work. So for this group of really high-committed, high-performing leaders, much of the advice out there is written for the masses and for people in the normal spectrum. And as I say respectfully, some of us are a bit more like freaks of nature, and that doesn't work. No different than in the world of horses. How you would train and treat and deal with a thoroughbred racehorse going to the Kentucky Derby is different than the horse you would have out on your recreational farm. They're both horses. It's just they're using their abilities at a much different level. I'll give you one of my favorites. One of the ones that drives me crazy is this thing called work-life balance. Oh, you need to have work-life balance. Well, that is insane. It's not even possible if you're a high-performing leader. And it's actually not even what you want, typically. Work-life balance is this creates this notion of this calm and things go well and it's, equalized and, everything flows nicely. Most high-performing leaders would be bored with that. They would more likely want to go to an amusement park and go on the crazy roller coaster or have some sort of adventure. They don't even want work-life balance in the first place. Never mind the fact that it's impossible to achieve. So for a lot of the people that I work with, the notion of work-life balance that comes up, it makes them feel guilty, makes them kind of feel ashamed that they don't have it and feel less than, when in reality they need to think differently. What I talk about in life, I say in my book, is I throw that concept away. Impossible, not going to happen. But there's this thing called work-self-life passion, which is taking that oxygen metaphor again, and if you have 100 units of your best oxygen in a week, do you allocate it in the way that you want between work, self, and life? Because you got to start with, in work-life balance, there is no self. Well, if you balance your work and your life and don't take care of yourself, you're going to have a catastrophe on your hands because you will implode. So you got to put yourself back in the equation. So, for example, for me and myself and my belief about most humans is that we need about 10% of our best oxygen or our best energy to keep ourselves strong and resilient. And it's not time, because time doesn't equal quality. It's just, you can have quality time with your family and friends in 15 minutes or an hour, but you could spend 10 hours with them and have no quality at all. So it's about best energy. So if we need, 10% of our best energy every week to take care of ourselves and make ourselves strong and resilient and fulfilled, and then you can dedicate other energy to the other parts of your life. So it's a smarter way to look at the equation, and it's doable. So for me, this time of year is very busy for me with my clients I'm traveling to all around the world. So I would generally have 10 to 15% of my best energy for myself at this time of year. About 15% for my family, and 60% for my work during a busy time. In the summer, I would have probably 25% of my energy for myself, 25% for my family, and then 50% for work, because it's a time when I take a bunch of time off. So getting to this notion of work, self, and life and how you allocate your energy it's a way healthier framework, and it gets you to think about and put your energy in the right areas.
That's so true, because I know a lot of top performers, if they get into if they're handed a book that talks about work-life balance, they pretty much will throw them away, because it's all about work for them,
It is.
Hitting those goals and performing well.
It is, and for them, the challenge, again, I am one of them, and it sounds like you're one of them. I got stuff to do in this world. I want to impact 1 million liters a month. I want to share what I know because it helps people. It's not what I do is not conventional wisdom. It's a little bit more extreme and tiered or designed for more extreme personalities. But for a lot of people, they don't want perfect balance. They don't want to just put in your hours and then come home and relax. They want to accomplish stuff in their world, and that's okay for them. Other people don't want it. Perfect. You go run your life the way you want to run your life. The key is for you to design it the way that suits you, and that's why you choose where you dedicate your energy. The problem for people like us, if we don't have a plan for the minimums we will give to ourselves and allocate to our life, work takes it all, and that's why we get in trouble. And if we go back to Elvis Presley or Kurt Cobain or Anthony Bourdain or Kate Spade or these other people that have sadly had their lives end early, I didn't know them personally. But when I go dig in and read and understand what was going on with them to the best that I can, there's similar patterns, very, very similar patterns. And all of them were so committed to what they were doing that self-sacrifice was just part of the recipe. And by the way, if you perfectly allocate your energy between work, self, and life, weird stuff's still going to happen. That's also why there's 16 other chapters in the book. But it doesn't protect, it puts you in a better place. And by the way, when weird stuff starts to happen in your world and in your head, the first place I go back to people is, are you getting enough energy for yourself? And in almost every single case, it's no. They're depleting themselves. And of course, if you wear yourself down, of course your brain's going to get weird.
What's interesting? There's not another book out there specifically for high achievers like yours and for leaders. There's not another one out there. People can go and search Google, and your book is it. No one has really addressed, because high achievers are a totally different animal than the typical employee would be, or the typical self-employed person would be.
Yeah, because we're a little bit off. High achievers are a very different breed, and because I've been like that my entire life, everyone around me thought I was weird. I remember when I went to college, as an example, I went to a college that had a compressed program, plus I worked for the school newspaper, started a business because I had to pay for it somehow, was class president of the business program, ran the marketing committee, ran study groups, put on, I was It makes no sense. And I won most of the most important scholarships. And I wasn't even a great student in high school. It was wild. But what I realized is I have this high-achieving DNA. When you put me into intense, high-pressure situations, I thrive, and I love it. But back in my life, my parents' friends were asking if I was a drug user or something because they couldn't believe what I was doing and that I sustained it. Like, literally, they thought that there was weird stuff going on. I was just in my element. It was my perfect environment, and I was happy as heck. And I was wearing myself down. But for high achievers, we are very, very different. And I have a bit of a theory that there's a glitch in our brain somewhere that makes us so high achieving. But it's the path we choose in our life. And just like those thoroughbred racehorses, we need really different things. And I get it. A lot of people in the world would say that there's something wrong with us, that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. But when you talk to most of these high achievers, they love it and they're very happy. They just have to learn how to self-manage better.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And that's why your book is such a great resource, because it helps people identify that and go, okay, I actually do need to take time for myself.
Yeah, and it's okay who I am and how motivated I am to do these things. Mm-hmm. It's just that we need different tools. And a part of it, and my underlying mission here is for people to take away some of the guilt and the shame people have around these things, particularly when stuff gets weird, because it does for all of us. And I talk a lot in the book. I got 2 chapters that are really directly related to mental health. And one is chapter 6, deal with your emotional junk, and then 7, manage your mental health. I will tell you, I have become an absolute expert on mental health, and I did not plan that. Did not plan it. And what I've seen and I work with, high-performing executives and CEOs all around the world, Australia, India, Middle East, Europe, Mexico, U.S., Canada, on a regular basis. I know these people intimately as I work with them over a period of years and see them grow and also see the bumps in the road. My hypothesis, with a decent amount of data, is that every high performer has mental meltdowns on a somewhat regular basis. Every. Now, they don't talk about it. Of course they don't. It's not good for their brand and their positioning in the company. Why don't the CEOs that have meltdowns tell you this when they're getting their awards on stage? Why? Because it's not good for the company and it's not good for marketing. I've got most of my CEOs win awards. Literally, most. And I have high-performing people who call me in the first place. I don't take, someone with an idea and build $1 billion company. They've already got momentum. Successful people already have momentum when they're calling me. But I know, I was at an awards ceremony just recently. One of my clients on stage getting an insanely prestigious award. But in his acceptance speech, is he talking about the times when he's had mental meltdowns and his face goes numb? No, which happens every 2 or 3 years? Absolutely not. He is very open and talks about other things. Or another CEO that sold his company for an incredible amount of money. When he's getting his acceptance speech, did he tell you about the mental meltdown he had during a critical time? And his brain function went from 10 out of 10, one of the smartest men I know, and his brain function and intelligence went down to 6 out of 10 without exaggeration. Literally, he got dumb because he was cooked. But no, they don't tell you this stuff. One, because they're proud, because of the marketing. But it happens to everyone. And that's why in the book I talk about you need to understand mental health very well. You need to know the signs of when you're starting to get messed up or your teammates are getting messed up. And you need a psychologist on speed dial. Because when it gets weird, not if, when, you need the person to go to talk to. And unfortunately, most of us are so damn proud and so damn motivated that when stuff gets weird, we feel weird and we don't get the right help. And then it gets weirder. And then our head just becomes a bigger mess. You can't believe it. And I'll give you an example. So, I'm being generic. I'm going to release an article about this on my newsletter. It's going to be confidential. But I had a CEO I work with call me and say, Kevin, you need to go work with the CEO. And I'm like, man, I'm busy. I'm not sure about his business. Not quite sure about a few things. He's like, Kevin, you just got to do it. So I went reluctantly and worked with the CEO. And he was a good guy. There's a few concerns I had. And the truth be told, and I don't have the text in front of me, but I can paraphrase it. After Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade both ended their life within a week, I wrote a blog about that and how it's sad, but not surprising because of what I've learned about mental health and high performers. And I talked about how it's sad and how to watch out for it and gave people instructions. If you see people that are like this, there's two things you can do. One, have a chat with them, and then let them know that it's normal and get them to a professional, being a psychologist, and either direct to a psychologist or through their doctor. This CEO sent me a text and said, hey, Kevin, thank you for writing about that. He goes, I know how they felt. I've been in those dark places, and I've had those crazy thoughts too. You just want the pain to end and it all to go away. And I'm like, whoa. He's basically indirectly telling me that he contemplated suicide. Mm-hmm. He never told me that. Later, I had my writer that I work with do an interview with him and interviewed him to get the full story so we can do an anonymous case study and share it with other leaders. He told me that I told her, because people don't always tell you in the moment because this is sensitive stuff, that at one point he was losing his mind and he was actually contemplating suicide. He had pulled over to the side of the road and called me. So I'm like, hey man, how's it going? And we had our little chat. I did not know this. Had a little chat. Yeah, no problem. He goes, I don't know if I can do this. I said, and I reinforced him, told him what he's, again, for the 15th time, told him what he's going through is normal. It's all going to get better. And somehow, reinforced and breathed some belief back in him, and then reminded him to make sure he goes to a psychologist this week. and away we go. I thought nothing of it. But that was a moment where he was thinking of taking his own life.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Kevin Lawrence in regards to his new book, Your Oxygen Mask First: 17 Habits to Help High Achievers Survive and Thrive in Leadership and Life. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Kevin Lawrence, and he's sharing with us his new book, Your Oxygen Mask First: 17 Habits to Help High Achievers Survive and Thrive in Leadership and Life. Now, Kevin, before we went for break, we were talking about the importance of mental health for high achievers. And you were sharing with us a very touching story about someone you were working with who was thinking of taking his own life.
Yeah, literally, one of the strongest people I've ever met. And if you met this person in public and talked to them, you would never, ever, ever think that a person like this would, one, have a mental meltdown like that, or actually consider taking his own life. Like, he's just as tough and as smart as they get. So the point of all this is that this happens to us, but we need to understand mental health. And there's a tool that if you don't have my book, it's in the book. Otherwise, go online and look up the Mental Health Continuum. It's put together by mental health associations in different parts of the world in slightly different forms. But it basically, when you read the symptoms, it helps you to assess where you or someone in your world is at. And it goes from green, yellow, orange, and red. And my belief and my experience is that most high performers go from green, which is very healthy, all the way through to yellow and orange on a regular basis. It's normal for them. And when things get really, really rough, people will end up in that red zone. And in that red zone, you need professional help because you're in deep trouble. And the symptoms sort of escalate as you go from green to red in terms of sleep patterns. Sleep obviously gets worse. Socialization. People generally tend to withdraw more as they mentally get in worse shape, which is the opposite of what you actually need. There's a saying that the tribe heals, and you need the tribe, but then you isolate yourself from the tribe. Addictive behaviors increase as you get closer to as you get closer to red. It's a fascinating model because many times you will see people with bad behavior, and you think they're bad people, when in reality, they're just in the orange or red zone in mental health, and they're starting to lose it. And what they need is to get to an expert. So, as I shared before, when people have mental health issues and it's starting to get to them, and anxiety climbs up or stress gets to them, and they get depressed or they get bad thoughts or lose faith or get negative, whatever it happens to be, the only solution is to get them to an expert. The expert is a psychologist through their doctor or directly. You can't help them. And the way it was explained to me is that if I have I fall when I'm skiing and break my leg and there's a compound fracture, is someone going to try to fix my leg? No. They call 911, get professional help, and I get taken care of at the hospital. Well, the same is true with mental health. Unfortunately, as friends or family, lots of us think we can help with mental health. And we give advice, which is absolutely wrong, because you don't know what you're talking about. And you will, with an intent to help, you often make it worse. The only advice is, hey, this is normal. You will absolutely get better, because people don't believe they will sometimes. Let's get you to a psychologist. Oh, geez, I don't know. Well, you can stand in the middle of a burning house, or you can get the fire department to put the fire out. Sitting here and doing nothing is not going to help you. Hey, do you want me to go with you? Go with them and to set up the appointment. Make the call with them. Go with them to their doctor. Whatever the heck it takes. Get them expert help, and things will always get better. So the mental health is something that it's incredible. And even for the highest performers that use all the tools in my book and stay on top of it, the mental health issues still come up sometimes, because that's just life.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, and if you are prepared, if you are not only looking at your own mental health, but those of the people that are around you in a work situation, it helps you to be able to help them.
Yes, and that's the way that my book is designed. It's a set of tools to make you a dramatically more capable leader. And you can go then and help yourself and your people. Because, I'm talking about things as I'm talking to you about yourself. But this is all stuff that the people on your team need to handle. And even if we kind of switch the gears a little bit, one of the other major things is the chapter 10 in the book, which is called Make Yourself Useless. If you want to grow as a leader and handle 10 times the sales volume, well, you need to find a way to build a team so strong that they can basically deliver that result, and you lead and facilitate it. Again, but building a very strong team is a very challenging thing for lots of people to do. And there's lots of conventional wisdom about it and all this other stuff. The way I look at it is, if you want to be a real high-performing leader and have enduring success in your company, you need to think like a professional sports team. And on a professional sports team, only the best talent gets to stay on the team, period. And I love people. I'm compassionate as heck. But I've learned in business, if you want to have a high-performing team, you can only be loyal to performance. You can only be loyal to performance. And as one of the CEOs I work with who used to play very high-level hockey, he goes, Kevin, I finally get it. I can't have dead weight on the ice. I really might like this guy. I might like having a beer with this guy. He's a good friend. But when it comes to playing in the game, he's not good enough and he holds the team back. And I go, exactly, that's the deal. Now, those are hard things to deal with when you love people and are loyal to people. But you've got to find ways to get people in a position where they can be a high performer, get them the training and development they need to be a high performer, or if not, move them somewhere else in the company or help them find a job in a different company where they can be a high performer. But that really affects a lot of senior leaders, is that they don't make the tough people decisions, and then that weight ends up climbing back up onto their shoulders instead of the person that should be doing the work. Again, it's common thinking, but in the people I work with, I'm relentless around you have to have a spectacular team, and it's not negotiable. Otherwise, you and the company suffer.
Well, I think most people don't believe that they can actually develop a team with A players in it.
True.
That's mostly what their team is. I've heard managers say, corporate level managers say you have to love your Ducks and the Eagles the same, and it's like,
no.
And there you go.
Look at that. Here's the thing, and I work with CEOs who want to build companies that scale very quickly. And there's a methodology that I've had a role in helping to create the most recent version of this other book called Scaling Up. But it's about companies that want to grow bottom line and top line at 20 to 30% per year. Right? This is not for the faint of heart. So if you've got a great little family business and you're happy with maintaining your business, you don't necessarily need to do these kinds of things. But if you want to scale a business at 20 to 30% a year and have, top quadrant bottom line, things like that, all that traditional HR theory, it drives me bonkers. And, a lot of HR leaders sometimes are very challenged by my beliefs and the way that I operate in companies. Because they have those theories of, you got to have your A's and your B's, and you should have a bell curve and all this other theory that it drives me bonkers. No, that's not what greatness is. You don't have a bell curve on a professional hockey team. You don't have a bell curve on the Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. You just take only the best, and the best. It's almost by the day or by the minute who's considered the best. So that's very hard for people to get their head around. So if you wanted to stick with that traditional corporate HR thinking, all the best to you. If it works for you, please, don't change it. Don't take my advice. But if you are a company that's scaling and it's getting hard, in almost every case, it's because your people systems and your people beliefs, it's rampant. And my observation, and again, I love people. I'm compassionate as heck, literally. But when I go into a company and start working with them, we usually have to make some very serious people changes because people are in roles where they can't win. And that's not fair to them either because they don't feel good. But the way that I think about it is it's an A to stay. An A being someone who fits the values and culture and consistently delivers the results. And the companies I work with, our goals are to get 80 or 90% of the people there. And most companies have about 25% A players. That is the normal way of operating. We put systems in place to get that number north of 80. And it's a lot of work and it's hard, but then you have such a talented team that things happen much, much easier. And again, it's not for the faint of heart. And if it's not for you, that's okay. Decide what is for you, but strengthening your talent does make a huge difference and makes your life way easier and takes the stress off your shoulders.
Well, I think most companies and corporations don't realize that they can actually strengthen the talent that they have.
Yes.
I mean, and it's just by, I think, additional education and motivation to move them forward.
It is, it's interesting. I've been fortunate to help coordinate groups of CEOs to go and spend a couple of days with Jim Collins in his laboratory. It's a magical experience. The guy is unbelievable. But one of the things that Jim teaches in his work is that, you have to have the right people in the right seats. And sometimes when someone's not in the right seat, they can't perform. So sometimes you do have to move people around. And then sometimes the key decision is, should I develop this person or should I replace them? Mm-hmm. And that's the tough one where people get stuck. Because if people have the will and the desire to get better and you invest in them and they do get better, it's shocking how many people can improve. And it takes us to another chapter in the book, is Tackle Tough Conversations, chapter 14. I have seen, what I know, when a leader is not performing highly in their job, the first thing to check is, do they know? And normally you would assume they do, but has their leader or manager told them? And often the answer is no. You cannot believe how many meetings I've been in where we finally get the leader to share with the person what's missing, and they're shocked. So the starting point, and especially in Tough Conversations chapter, is a tool to help you with it, is to make sure these people know that they're not meeting the mark, and you map out a plan for them to get there with them. They would call it PIPs or performance improvement plans in some companies, lots of different versions, but generally they don't get used. And any tool that gives a person clarity about what's expected and then has a process to help them get there is the right thing to do. It's supposed to be what managers and leaders do, but it's often missed. And that's where HR leaders and I agree 100%. We need to make sure these people know they're not meeting the mark, and then try and help them get there. And I have an executive 3 weeks ago I was with. I won't say where, but it was in North America, and they were missing the mark. And when we work with companies, we make sure there's very clear KPIs for each leader that indicate how well they and their team are performing, and they have clear outcomes or goals every quarter, like projects they have to finish. And so, with this leader, we were sitting down 2 quarters in a row, and a lot of their stuff was red. They weren't hitting the mark. So in the third quarter, we also introduced doing a 360, where we did 360s on all the executives in the company. So they had transparency on how they delivered in the quarter and the 360. And this leader got 2 big pieces of feedback. And I have to tell you, I have learned to be such a believer in the human spirit, because they were massive changes for this experienced executive. And 90 days later, they made a massive change that almost you wouldn't believe. And they went from being a lower performer to a very high performer in that 90-day period, after a couple quarters of missing, and made those other behavior changes that came out of the 360. It was astonishing. But here's the dynamics you have. They probably had heard the feedback before, but we're in a room with me as the coach and the CEO and the executives. They were delivering red on their accountabilities. They got specific feedback on the 360. If that's not going to get you to step up, nothing will. You're embarrassed in front of your peers, in front of the CEO and the company coach. And usually, and you don't always need to take it to that extreme. It can be done one-to-one. But in a supportive team environment, which this company did have, bringing all that together was the perfect opportunity for this person to step up or otherwise show this wasn't for them. But most people don't create those environments, and those environments help teams to improve. And as Coach Mike Krzyzewski, the famous Duke basketball coach, says, the best way to improve yourself is to be a part of a team. Then he goes on to say, because on a team, you don't want to let your teammates down, so you're going to push yourself harder than you ever would on your own.
Well, isn't that the truth, Because it's interesting. And do you feel that sometimes when companies have this kind of staggering, or lapse in growth, it's because they get too comfortable?
Yeah. Success is lethal. Or as Jim Collins says, good is the enemy of great. So I work with a lot of growth companies, and sometimes they do get messed up on their growth. And there's a couple of different things that happen. One, they get distracted. Growth brings lots of opportunities, and lots of opportunities for lateral projects and lateral distraction. So I have seen when the CEO starts to get distracted with shiny new projects that don't directly drive growth, that changes the focus of the organization, so that can mess up the growth because you're not focusing on the drivers of growth. The other thing is success and people getting complacent and taking it for granted. I worked with one company that was having growth problems. They had grown 20-30% year on year for a decade, and then it stopped. And I remember I went to them and I said, what's going on? And we tried to dig into it, and this was 2006, and the economy was incredibly strong in North America, and they were blaming the economy. I'm like, no. As we dug in, I asked, well, how about the customers? How are the customers doing? Oh, they're great. They said, new customers and customer growth for us is like a tap. When we want more, we just turn on a tap and more comes out. And I'm like, ooh, that's a dangerous subject. That's starting to sound a little bit complacent. Mm-hmm. So I said, hey, well, do you have the customer feedback? Oh, yeah, we got lots of it. It's great. I said, awesome. And on the way out the door, they handed me the customer feedback. It was like spreadsheets printed out on multiple pages. So on the plane home, I started to read it, and I swear, like in the cartoons, you can see when the steam starts coming out of people's ears that they're so mad. That was me. Because I was only on page 1 of 20 of customer feedback, and the customers were screaming about issues.
Oh, no.
Yeah, screaming about 3 very specific issues. And this is a business that did many medium-sized transactions, like thousands of transactions a day of a couple $100. And so it turns out no one was paying attention anymore. They just assumed that it was great, because they'd got complacent. They'd grown year on year, and they'd lost their obsession with taking care of the customer. So, yes, it happens a lot. And the worst thing, and I was talking about this yesterday, day before, with a group of leaders, is that when we get successful, as leaders, we personally get complacent in our own growth. And that is the lethal spot. So this is chapters in the book 16, keep going for it, and learn like your life depends on it, which is chapter 8, so 8 and 16. And, the most successful leaders, because it's generally, when people hit their stride and really start to perform, on average, in their 30s into their 40s, people get an operating system and a rhythm and a way of working, and the second they think they've got it, and they don't keep tweaking that operating system, they're in deep, deep trouble. Now they're turning into a liability. So in those 2 chapters, one, the learning like your life depends on, is just literally continuing to expose yourself to new learnings and thinking, like stuff in my book. Keep going for it is even more important for some people, which is to continue to stretch your soul and put yourself in places where you're very uncomfortable. So it's to keep stretching yourself. And in the chapter, we get you to come up with what we call a stretch list. What are the things that we're going to do to keep you to stretch yourself? And a stereotypical is the 50-year-old executive who's been very successful, and then they stop putting in the extra hours, they stop taking any risk whatsoever, and then they just become all about managing the status quo. And that's just, not only is it toxic to a lot of companies, but it's lethal because they're operating based on a skill set that was relevant 10 years prior, and the world changes. So the company becomes stale because the individuals do, and I'll give you an example. So for myself, I continue to push myself on new things and learning new things. Our ego often wants us not to. Our ego wants us just to do what we're already great at. But even recently, last year, I live in Canada, up in Vancouver, and, hockey and skating is a part of the culture up here. But I'm not a great skater. And I have a colleague who used to play professional hockey. So on a Saturday morning, my son and I went out with her, and she taught us how to skate properly. And when you see professional ice skaters or hockey players where they can go and then they can slide sideways, it's a stop, and they spray ice up in the air. Well, like in 5 minutes, she taught us how to do that. And
that's cool.
It was really cool. And it was actually very easy when you learn from an expert. But, as a guy in his 40s, and I'm there with my son and his 15-year-old son, do we really want to show up at a public ice rink and get skating lessons? Do I want to show up and get basic skating lessons? My ego doesn't want me to, but yet it's brilliant for my soul because I put myself in a place of vulnerability and a place of true learning, and I evolved a little bit that day. But most people won't allow themselves to do that, and then they get tight and complacent.
It's really interesting because, people, if they're not willing to stretch and grow, they really do get left behind, especially in the age we're in now. Technology is, it's just hard to keep up with that. And if you're not ahead of the curve, you're behind it.
Yeah, and, and one of the CEOs I work with, he's between his company called MAQ Software, Rajiv Agrawal, an awesome CEO. They got 500 employees. They're a partner to Microsoft, and they do some brilliant, brilliant work. But for them, there's this thing called artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's a big deal. He's got himself and a bunch of executives, a bunch of them will be learning 3 hours a day, every day. Because if you want to be the best in the world, which they can't help but want to be, in something like AI, it takes a lot of learning. It's a new field. And, you show me an executive and a company of a culture that will dedicate 3 hours of learning a day for their senior people, they're going to be more successful in the future. How can they not? But I would challenge, to find executives who will learn 3 hours a week or maybe a month. I'm talking formal learning, not learning by doing or learning from mistakes, which is good. And for most people, they're not able to make that happen. There's a wonderful book called Deep Work. Cal Newport. Oh, I hope I get that right. Pretty sure it's Cal Newport. The book for sure is Deep Work. And one of the things he talks about is the biggest skill for leaders today with all this rapid change is the ability to do deep cognitive thinking and to get you into a place where you can learn and evolve. And he says the ability to focus and learn is going to be one of the most important skills in the next decade. It's the only way you can keep up with it. And I fully believe it. And in companies that we work with, we have a team of advisors that go and help companies with these things. In the companies we work with, for most of them, part of our rhythm is that there's a book every single quarter that the leadership team reads, and then we talk about it at the next quarterly meeting. Because I have a secret hidden agenda in the people I work with is to get them to learn a lot more. Because life's easier when you have better awareness and tools. But to get some of these busy people to learn on a regular basis, it is hard. So as a leader myself, my job is to get people to do, high-value activities. When you have to show up and talk about it at the next quarterly meeting, it gives you some pretty good incentive to read the book. And it helps the team to keep moving ahead.
Yeah, without a doubt. They're able to kind of, they're going to go by what the leader does.
Yep.
And if the leader's out there reading the book and everyone's, participating in that, they're going to learn a few things too.
Yeah, and the most successful CEOs that I work with are big, big learners. And whether they're parts of, YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, or there's a Mackay CEO forums or other things, Tech and Vistage, all those other groups, lots of great groups around the world that do these things. For all of them, they have realized, they don't know what they don't know. And so that the learning is a big component of a lot of the best CEOs I work with, and it's the only way they can stay on top of it, because otherwise you do fall back. Now, learning alone isn't enough. You have to implement the stuff. So to those of you out there who love to learn, but nothing ever changes, stop learning and go do something, because that doesn't work. But for a lot of people, they just don't know enough to be able to keep pushing ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We used to get people I'd work with that say, well, I don't know everything. I need to learn everything. It's like, you know what? You're never going to learn all of it. So let's just get out there and start working,
Exactly. And that's, and I talk about in the book on Learn Like Your Life Depends on It. There's two things to learn about. One is called strategic learning, and then two is personal fascinations. It's important to fuel your brain with what you're fascinated with personally, and whether you want to read novels or, it doesn't matter. That's important. But the strategic learning is, what is the area I need to master to be way more effective in my role? And truth be told, I've been doing it for 25 years. And when it comes to high-performing leaders executing better strategies to make companies grow and be profitable, I am a master. No two ways about it. But if you want to look in many other areas of learning, I am ignorant. Knowing history and what happened where in the world, I am about as weak as it could get. I get the concepts. I am not good at that. Science, I am so weak, it's not funny. And you can go through different aspects of the world. You could almost put me on the ignorant list, literally. Current events, I'm on top of current events in business that relate, and not even what's happening in companies, but just overall trends in business at a very high level, but day to day, ignorant. Some stuff around pop culture, almost ignorant, because all my stuff is obsessed with the people I work with and helping them to succeed, and I know more about that than majority of people in the world. But the areas that I'm ignorant, I have to be ignorant because I'm trying to master a certain area. And there's lots of other people around me that can help. For example, law. I get law very good at a conceptual level. But on the details of HR law and other things, you just pick up the phone. And that's another chapter in my book, which is Quadruple Your IQ, which is having what I call 14X advisors. Is that you can be incredibly strong at your core skill, in my case, coaching CEOs and executives to scale companies and scale themselves. But then you have these 14X advisors, which are people that are experts in all these different areas that have successfully done what you want to do 14 times before. And that's a real important point, because I know all kinds of people to call to get things done, but they are not first-timers or second-timers. They are highly experienced pros. And if I can give one piece of advice to all the leaders in the room, when you got a problem, the first question you should ask yourself is, who would be the best person in the world I could talk to? Not who could I talk to. Who would be the best person? Who's already been through it and is a master? And unfortunately, we take advice from a lot of people in this world who are not masters, and then we wonder why we get ourselves in trouble.
That happens way too often.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Well, Kevin, we could talk for hours on your book. You're such a wealth of information. Where can people connect with you and learn not only more about your book, but be part of your community?
Mm-hmm. The best place to go is lawrenceandco.com, LAWRENCEANDCO.com. You can also search up Coach Kevin, and it'll get you there. You get more information on the book itself and our company and how we can help. And it's if you're a growing company that needs guidance to help you to continue to scale, or you hit a rough spot, that's what we do. And we have a team of other advisors that we know all around the world that have great tools and frameworks that help as well. So yeah, lawrenceandco.com. There's a newsletter there, lots of additional resources, videos, details on all these chapters in the book. There's videos and other resources there as well. And there's a free assessment you can do just to see where you stand in terms of your own oxygen mask and putting yours on first.
Well, hey, that's such great resources and great advice there. And, of course, your book, Your Oxygen Mask First. People want to pick up their own copy. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of fun, and I love sharing these things. And, the last thing that I'll leave people with, and, myself and Marianne and other people in the world, all we want is good things for ourselves and to make things happen in the world. So my recommendation is, when something doesn't work right, just find a way to reach out for a specific tool that can help you. And if you can't find it, ask someone who's already been through that same challenge and come successfully out the other side.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Your Oxygen Mask First. 17 Habits to Help High Achievers Survive and Thrive in Leadership and Life. Again, you can pick up Your Oxygen Mask First at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and all indie bookstores. If you'd like to connect with Kevin, you can at his website, lawrenceandco.com. We'll have the link below. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.